thank you very much for having us. Just a real quick, not really clarification, but just so you understand how we got together. I taught at Churchville Child High School for almost my entire career, and was so fortunate to be able to spend 17 of those years in the same room at the high school in Churchville Child High teaching instrumental music. We had an average of 150 students throughout, and we were both massive viewers of what was then called smart music. And we've developed a whole bunch of ideas on ways you can use it thinking outside the box. So that's kind of what this presentation is for. So if I could just share my screen real quick here. The purpose of this session is just to think about if your students have the ability to self-evaluate, and if they have the ability to set achievable goals to improve, and then they can, through deliberate practice skills, to meet those, have the skills necessary to meet those goals. If they can do that, the entire ensemble is going to benefit for you, because you're going to spend so much less time fixing mistakes and more time making music with your kids. So that's kind of the premise of this session here. So I'll pass the buck on to Mr. Bacon and let him go.
And of course, the only proper response to go green is go white. Very proud Michigan State grad, but I now get to say I am a newly minted PhD from the University at Buffalo. Today, our battle plan is to give you a little bit of an introduction about where we're coming from, and then talk about the topic of goal setting, and then try to define what Kevin and I think might be reasonable goals. I'm going to do a very, very short bit on rubrics. That could be an entire session unto itself. And then I'm going to hand it back to Kevin to talk about some suggestions for a process that you could do with students, as well as then some final thoughts and hopefully time for questions. But apparently there is a Q&A, so if you have questions, please fire them as we go, and hopefully we can try to answer them as we go. So goal setting. In performing ensembles, we as ensemble directors tend to focus on that final goal of the concert or the next big performance. It was really funny, all of a sudden our district got really focused on project-based learning, PBL, project-based learning, and we had to go to all these workshops on project-based learnings, and we'd be sitting there with our art colleagues going, that's all we do. It's project-based learning. It's really kind of the cornerstone of our curricula, that big concert or that art project or the upcoming performance we have. This is kind of what generally drives what we're doing in lessons and rehearsals. But what if we thought more about the learning process? How much better would our older students get within the rehearsal if we focused on the learning process right from the beginning, rather than focusing on that final product? So I think we can all agree that music making requires a wide variety of skills, and we as music educators are constantly trying to balance how much we want to get to with the limited time that we have. But as experienced teachers, though we are constantly modeling musical skills, I have to ask, are we taking the time to consciously model goal setting and self-evaluation for our students? We kind of know from psychology that very, very young children do that process of self-talk as they're beginning to learn how to think. We model to them how to talk through the steps of what they're going to do. We might catch them talking through those steps. And so even though we're not dealing with toddlers, we're dealing with young musicians, it's good for us to model that self-talk out loud as a way to guide our students in developing these skills of thinking about learning. And why should we take the time? Well, students that can improve on their own can help the overall group improve at a faster rate. Students that can self-evaluate save precious time in rehearsal by recognizing and being able to fix their own mistakes, or maybe politely suggest to the musicians around them, oh, hey, can we try to get this together as a section? We should model goal setting to empower our students to take ownership of their own learning and their own growth. Hopefully, in the end of the day, we're all building independent musicians. So what should these goals include? Well, for younger students or students that are new to this kind of process, it just might be simple goals of playing or singing the correct pitch at the correct time. Maybe with these younger students, we're focused on guiding them through this process while we're getting the basics of musicianship down. But then as students mature, the scope of these goals need to expand. Maybe we need to start having them think about tone and styles and correct execution of different types of articulations, bowing, dynamics, diction for our singers, etc. All leading to getting them to constantly knowing how to effectively self-evaluate. So our main focus today is to offer some suggestions on the how of how we can teach kids to self-evaluate. So I think we can all agree that we want students to get better. But I want to ask you some questions right now for a little bit of self-reflection. Are we as teachers setting attainable goals? Are we setting the goals too low, too high? What do we know about our students to help us kind of dial in whether the goals that we're setting are attainable? Are we guiding students on how to set their own goals? And hopefully their goals line up with our goals. Sometimes they don't. Are the students evaluating whether they met the goal? And if not, did they miss the mark? I mean, how often do we ask the kids, hey, did you play that correct? And like, I don't know, you tell me. Maybe we need to help them be able to self-evaluate so that they know when they messed up. Do they know how to self-evaluate? I guess the other part is quite often, hey, how'd you do? And they're focusing on all these little negative things, not realizing that actually they've come a really far way, and teaching them how to celebrate their successes. And then part of that, do they know how to practice to meet some kind of specified goal? Now I got to flip it over. Are we as teachers taking time to follow up with the students? Did the student properly assess their own performance, right? That are they coming up with some kind of self-evaluation that's way off the mark? Or hey, nope, they're getting it. Did the student actually meet the goal that was put before them? Further, are both teachers and students using this collected data to make a plan for future growth? And lastly, what tools can we use to facilitate this? So more on this a little bit later. That's what Kevin's going to cover, some options that are available through MakeMusic Cloud to use to be able to facilitate learning about self-evaluation. So what are reasonable goals? Ask a student to set a future goal and they might respond, get better. But get better how, right? Maybe their goal is completely unrealistic, or maybe, I want to sound like Arturo Sandoval. Well, okay, great kid. I'm appreciative that a fifth grader knows who Arturo Sandoval is, but that might not be a good goal for next month. So we need to have reasonable goals to enjoy a feeling of success. Now, I was a member of WW, the thing formerly known as Weight Watchers. And one of the things that I kind of took away and I thought of as a parallel was we need to celebrate tiny goals. They called them non-scale victories, those things that we do that help better health, that aren't necessarily showing up on the scale when you had to weigh in every week. Now, my current state is a little bit of the side of what happens when you spend 18 months writing a dissertation. So I'm back on the wagon, trying to make those tiny steps towards getting this large mountain of, I don't know, blubber gone. But those little tiny steps are what motivate me to keep going. And it also is what we need to help guide our students to motivate them to keep going. Sometimes when we pass out that new piece of music, it's such a huge mountain. They don't think they can do it. And man, it did my heart so proud at the end of this year to have my middle schoolers going, oh, I didn't think we could play that piece. And it's amazing how great it sounded in the concert. And part of it was those little tiny steps along the way to get it better. So with our students, we have to be that cheerleader as they're successful with each tiny step towards the larger mountain. And that's going to help them trust you that these small, reasonable goals are going to be vital to the overall process. So, what's a reasonable goal? I would say it's a goal that is achievable with the proper amount of effort for each individual student. Now, my research area is on music potential, music aptitude. And we know from the 100+ years of research in music potential that not all students can have the same goals. A student with high music aptitude that isn't being properly challenged, probably getting bored. That probably causes them to quit our ensembles. The opposite is true as well. A student with low music aptitude, low music potential, that's being challenged too much over and over is just going to have that helpless feeling, and they're probably going to drop. So we want to be the cheerleader as well as help dial in what might be the right goal to appropriately challenge every student. The more we know about our individual students, the more we can teach to their individual differences. So something that I took from WW that I thought was hysterical. As soon as it was introduced, it seemed like I couldn't go anywhere without hearing about SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym that helps us try to make what I would say a good, reasonable goal. The S is for specific. Our goal needs to be simple, sensible, but significant towards moving towards that larger mountain of a bigger goal. Most importantly, it has to be measurable, right? It can't be something that we're really not sure if we're doing it or not doing it. Let's have a specific measurable goal that is achievable. The teacher and the student need to agree, okay, this seems to be a good thing to do. When I was working through my WW coach, we were like, okay, I want to lose 25 pounds by next week. Oh, that's not a good goal. Maybe we look for, hey, getting out and walking for 20 minutes for 4 days. Yeah, I could do that. That seems pretty achievable. Is it relevant? Is it something that's reasonable, that's results-based, that's directly connected towards that big giant mountain? And lastly, it needs to be time-bound. It has to be limited so that it's not some nebulous, way out in the future kind of goal. Like, okay, what do you think is something that you can reasonably do in the next week? Both us as teachers and students are going to be more successful and more motivated to achieve this type of goal because it's breaking things down in more manageable chunks. Students have to feel like they're getting better. So again, back to what I was doing with WW, it's all about tracking, right? Tracking those tiny little goals, the little progress that you're making, and it's going to help motivate you towards getting better. So you have a SMART goal. Now what? Well, we have to model a process of working towards meeting the goal, evaluating whether or not how we did, and then setting that new goal. So this is something that Kevin and I did in our lessons. Now I continue to do them. Kevin has retired. I think he sits around a golf course and drinks tall frosty beverages or something. I don't know. I get to retire and anyhow. But something that we did all the time was to have the kids listen to each other and evaluate, offering what I would call the blessings and the wishes. I tried to guide my students to, and I still guide my students, okay, we got to start with blessings. What are the things that they did well? And then let's try to find a way to phrase, what are your wishes for improvement? What do you hope that with time they could get better? And I guess part of that is having a classroom where that kind of interaction is good. So what's this process all about? Step one is having that open dialogue between teacher and student throughout, that sense of working as a team. You need to have a classroom where the environment exists. It's just okay to make a mistake, as long as the mistakes are opportunities for improvement. I model screwing up in front of my students and how to say, oh, it's not the end of the world. All musicians make mistakes. Maybe I need to practice that a little bit more. Or, oops, my finger slipped. Okay. Or as a woodwind player, it's always the reed. I gotta fiddle with my reed. You want to model with younger students or students that are new to the technique something very simple to start. Remember, the educational goal at first needs to be the process, not the product. And as I put on my professorial hat, I'm working with my college students as new teachers in teacher education, it's trying to remind them that there's so many things we want them to do, but really you can only get a young student to focus on one thing at a time. Let's focus on this one thing and get it better, and then move on. So with younger students, maybe have you as the teacher set that SMART goal. And again, you need to talk this out loud. You're modeling that self-talk that's part of the process. And you want to break down each element. So for example, my SMART goal might be, by next week, I want you to play from measure 10 to measure 22 of whatever the pieces that you're doing, using the correct pitches and rhythms with a steady beat. Well, let's break it down. Is it specific? Yes. Measure 10 through 22 of fill in the blank piece. Is it measurable? Well, yeah, our goal is the correct pitches and rhythms with a steady beat. We can measure that. Is it achievable? I hope so. If you have the sense of knowing what your students are where they're at, dialing in, hopefully you've picked something that is achievable within that time. Is it relevant? Yeah, it's part of the larger piece that we're working on. And is it time bound? Yeah, by next week. So how do we know if the student did it or not? Well, you could ask them to record themselves, or you could use MakeMusic Cloud and all the fantastic assessment tools that it has. The teacher also needs to model deliberate practice techniques as we're going to help the student meet their goal. Now, deliberate practice refers to a special type of practice that is purposeful and systematic. While regular practice might just be mindless repetition, deliberate practice requires focused attention and is conducted with the specific goal of improving performance. All right, so send the kids out, they got their week, come back. You and the student need to review the results. The student may have recorded, but did they listen to it? Did they look at the assessment? Did they just like, all right, good enough, I'm done? Listen to it, both of you together, and then use that talking out loud to reflect on what they did well, the good, what wasn't so hot, the bad, and maybe the ugly. Again, this is the time for modeling blessings and wishes. These are the things that you did well. These are the things I wish that we need to fix on. So based on the results, then the goal can get adjusted in either direction to make it more achievable. Maybe the goal was a little bit too ambitious, or maybe it needs to be a little more challenging. Or you can say, good job. You hit the goal. Now let's make a new one. Again, I can't say this enough. You need to model out loud this process of evaluation, goal revision, and goal setting. So what happens as students get older or they're becoming more experienced with this process? Well, start using trickier goals like tone, dynamic control, phrasing, posture. These are things that MakeMusic Cloud doesn't assess, but there are tools that you can use to assess these. Students do need to be familiar with SMART goals and how to use MakeMusic Cloud to aid self-evaluation. In these cases, both the student and the teacher can use audio-video recordings as well as rubrics to aid evaluation. Now, like I said, rubrics can be a session unto itself. I just want to touch on a couple of key points that I try to teach my teacher ed students to think about. Step one, you want to make sure that you're writing clear, well-defined rubrics for consistent grading. Why? Well, the students should be able to tell you the score before you do. And that first attempt at writing a rubric is a draft. You're going to want to get the feedback from the students. You're going to want to hear the questions they have. So you're going to edit them over time and really kind of try to dial in what some good descriptors can be. Now, I want to stress a simple practical thing. Always present with the highest level first, going left to right. There's a lot of things online, rubric makers, and one of the things that bothers me is so many of them put the lowest level on the left. No, I want my students to see the goal. What is the bestest, most goodest thing that you want them going for? Read that first, and then what happens on down the line. Make sure that you're using easy, grade appropriate, student-friendly language, right? As they get older, we're trying to get them to master the technical language of the music profession, the technical language of the arts. So maybe we need to start with simple concepts in the rubrics that then the rubric language changes as they get older, but maybe the rubric itself is saying the same thing. It needs to be usable by all students, right? You need to have, as you're writing a rubric, well, what if it's a percussionist and articulation is not going to be the thing to focus on? How might you adapt it so that there is the percussionist variation? You need to have good inter-rater reliability between students as well as between teachers. Now, inter-rater reliability, again, sorry, I live in empirical testing. Give me my, give me numbers, give me a good spreadsheet, and I'm a happy man as a researcher. Inter-rater reliability is where you take a set of scores and you compare from A to B and see if the students are staying close. If you have good inter-rater reliability, that's going to help you with your usefulness. When Kevin and I were having to do testing as part of APPR, when the state of New York decided we had to do tests to rate our value as teachers, we actually included the inter-rater reliability as we went to make sure that we were both scoring things using our rubrics in a similar fashion. Lastly, you want to use rubrics over and over to reinforce their accuracy. Use them in class, in rehearsal, in the comments that you're giving, both verbal and written, back for the students. The more you're going to use the language, the more you're modeling how to use the language. This is going to give students the opportunity to practice using the language of music self-evaluation, so the terms and specific concepts to our art have greater meaning than just being words shout out what they did well or what we did better, right? When we get that part, hey, listen to the recording. How did the kids think you did? Phrasing, dynamic, they're just shouting out words, dynamics, articulation, the things that we've said in rehearsal, but are they saying them and knowing what they mean? So next slide, here is an example of a number of rubrics. This was kind of a part of when I was talking about the APPR. We developed these. We had these posted in our practice rooms and our ensemble spaces. And I do want you to notice that it's not a 0 to 100 scale. We have 4 clear levels of superior, excellent, good, and developing, as well as descriptors to allow students to be able to kind of have like, oh, I think I'm at a good. Let me try to work for next week to meet the requirements for an excellent. So I've talked at you quite enough. I'm going to take my professorial hat. This is where the notes say that I have to remind Kevin to turn his camera back on, make sure that he hasn't fallen asleep on us. And he's going to take you through some suggestions of how to use MakeMusic Cloud to do all the stuff I've been talking about. So Kevin, take it away.
I believe the correct response for being on the golf course all the time would be, what, are you jealous?
If I only knew how to golf.
All right, so here's some ideas that we've come up with over the time. Let's talk about the practical end of it. First of all, the comments section. We just overlook it so many times. We just want to get a grade in the grade book. We want to see if they played the right notes. But that comment section is your communication between an individual student back and forth. So you don't have to say these things in front of a classroom, in front of a band or a choir. You don't have to say it in front of a small ensemble. You could say this just to the students, so you can be honest and get feedback of what's going through the student's head, and use that comment section to get a lot of this stuff out. Also, brand new to MakeMusic Cloud, ungraded assignments. You can actually assign a student something that is not going to be graded. It's not going to be a part of their report card. So it can be an honest assignment. You know, if you can't do it, let me know you can't do it, and we'll work on some way that will get you be able to do it eventually. So create an ungraded assignment and share that with the student, and you can communicate back and forth doing that. The students guess the rubric grade. If they're doing an assignment that is, and it's under a rubric, and the kids have the rubrics in front of them, have them listen to it and say what their grade would be. And the MakeMusic Cloud doesn't do that, but can the student do that? And do you agree with what they're doing? So they're assessing, they're self-assessing there. Give your students choices. For instance, if you can't play it at this tempo, maybe you slow it down and you can play it, and then the goal will be to speed it up. Or if you're advanced and you can play it at that tempo, how about you take it a little bit faster and challenge yourself and see how fast you can actually go? Give the students choices. When you give them choices, they're more apt to do the practicing that they need to do to perfect it. The my part can be on or off. That way, if they need the help of my part, they can turn it on. If they don't need it, they can turn it off. Vocalists, very big on that for them. Pick one of 3 assignments. If you send out 3 ungraded assignments and say, here's 3 assignments, pick one of them and do it. You're narrowing the focus down, but you're also giving the student a choice. You know, I picked this one because I like the way it sounds. So that student's more likely to practice that. You could also go even farther and say, find a piece that you want. Go, you know, just let the students know you've got access to everything. It's an incredible amount of material. Find something that you want me to assign. Send me a note that says why you want that one assigned, and we'll decide together whether it was appropriate or not based on your level. We also have something in MakeMusic Cloud called playlists. I'll demonstrate this a little bit better, but if you wanted to focus that, you know, find any piece, you could like narrow it down to these 6 pieces, pick from these 6 pieces, something like that. That's playlists. We'll talk about that in just a few seconds here. Now, if you are familiar with it, the teacher picks a piece out of the book and then can assign it to the students. But there's a couple things I want to point out here. First of all, you can turn the my part on or off. You can turn the accompaniment on and off. So if you share that with the students while they're practicing, they could have the help or turn it off if they don't need it. Vocalists can actually start with the my part on and the accompaniment off and just meld it together until the accompaniment all that's playing and the my part is off. So you have that skill. So teach that skill. Tempo, you could set it to any tempo that you want. Slow it down if you need the help, or if you want to challenge yourself, go ahead and speed it up. Once you click the assign button and assign it to the students, you're going to see a screen something like this, where you could put in the comment section. Don't ignore the comment section. It's where you're going to tell the students specifically what it is you are after. Pay close attention to the articulation markings. Listen to your recording and grade your performance using the articulation rubric from class. You grade it and then send it to me. In the comments section, tell me why you picked that grade. Specific instruction that's going to know if the students are help you to understand and help the student to eventually develop the skills of self-assessment. The video recording is also new. If you haven't opened this up in a while, you can now see the student practicing, so you could add rubrics like posture or things like that. So consider whether or not you want to use the video recording. Grading used to just be with the rubrics. However, now they've added ungraded assignments, so that is an option for you to use. That's also brand new. All right, so the student opens up the assignment you gave them. The first thing they see is the instructions. Pay close attention to the articulation markings. As a student, I'm now saying, teacher's listening to articulation markings, so I better pay close attention to that. Teach the students to read and pay attention to those assignments, all right? Student hits the record button, plays, got all the green notes, all the red notes, doesn't just hit submit because the student now knows, oh, the articulation is important, not just the green note, red note, because you've given them that instruction, all right? That's the video that I wanted to share with you. If the video is bothering the student, you can inform them that they can hide it if they just makes it disappear. Still there, but you're just hiding it, so that's something that you might want to know about. If you wish to turn off the assessment tool, this is really neat because under assessment, you can hit show assessment and turn it off. It turns off the green note, red note, even though it's still assessing, the student can't see it. So the student plays this with that turned off and then turns it on, and they can see where the mistakes were. So what I would suggest is, before you turn that back on, why don't you decide where the mistakes were, turn it on, and see how accurate you were. All right. And of course, you could turn the video back on at any point if you wish to do that. All right. So now we're back here. The student, and this is so important, don't just submit the first 100 you get because it was probably just an accident. I got every note green. Quick, submit before it goes away. No, you've got to be able to reproduce that skill, and that's what deliberate practice is. So listen to it. Listen to the articulation. MakeMusic Cloud is not grading the articulation. So that's the button to listen to it. Teach your kids to do that. And you can do that by having them get 100 more than once. Get 300s, listen to them, pick the best one, and send it to me. All of their takes for that session are kept over here so they can pick the ones that they want to send in. And then they submit their button, and they have an opportunity to comment on their submission. So the student would write something like, after listening to the recording, I think my articulation is pretty close, but the slurred notes don't sound even. I'll work on getting my eighth notes even and be able to resubmit. So the student noticed there was a rhythmic error, even though MakeMusic Cloud didn't pick up on it. It gave everything green. What happened was the student was playing the slurred notes kind of like 16th notes. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-da-ba-ba-bum-bum. I heard that happen a lot as I was going through teaching students. So the student picked up on that by listening to it. It didn't grade it because it was being assessed at the easy level, not at the strict level, different tolerance levels. If I changed that level, that wouldn't have been so easy. So the kid picked up on that. Kid is doing a great job of self-assessing. And then I open up that assignment that the student sent back to me. There's the comment that the student made. So I read that and I realize, he picked up on it. So now we can fix it. I listen to it, come up with the same conclusion. By the way, you can download the video. When you open it up from the download, it's a full screen, so you can get a much better picture of it. But I want to write comments back to the student, something like, hey, what a great goal. The slurred eighth notes sounded like 16th notes. We're explaining it. We're giving them a suggestion on how to practice it deliberately and how to improve. So that's that's one process that you could use using all of those things in MakeMusic Cloud. All right, some other possible assignments, suggestions, or just comments. Find a tempo that you can play this assignment getting a grade of 90 or above. The grade has to be 90 or above, but you can do it at any tempo. So if you have to slow it down to get a 90 or above, getting the right notes is more important than playing at speed. We can always work on getting the speed up. All right, so I'm letting the student know that. Submit the best of those three ungraded assignments in the comment section. Tell me what your goal tempo is. So say you played it at 40 beats per minute. Your goal for the next 2 weeks is going to be, I want to get it up to 60. So then we've got that time frame in there of when we're going to get it done. So there's kind of a deadline the kids can work toward getting that deadline met. Here's another one. Practice this assignment with the assessment tool turned off. When you're ready, record yourself, then listen to the recording, identify your mistakes, turn on the assessment tool, and see how you did. Submit the performance and write the results of that, which is far more important than submitting the performance, because I want to know if you're able to hear the mistakes before. So if we make mistakes in our ensemble, we can fix them without having the teacher have to stop the rehearsal to fix one simple mistake. Are you able to hear them yourselves? Okay. Another idea, sing this assignment until you get a grade of 95 or above, 95%. Listen to the recording and give yourself a diction grade, completely unrelated to the 95%. You can get 95% right note, wrong note, but not understand a single word. So the diction grade, using the rubric that we've been using in class, is what's important to me. Write that grade in the comment section, and more importantly, include your reasons for giving yourself that grade. Students are self-assessing, whether they're able to do it or not. All right. The playlist that I suggest, share a group of selections with the following instructions. So you're sharing a playlist with the students and you let them know. Review the songs in the playlist. Pick your favorite one out of these 6 or whatever it is, and don't hit the play button. Don't touch the play button. Think of it like a piece of paper or a method book, an actual book in front of you. Don't hit the play button. That's not what this is about. Play it. practice it without hitting that button. Send me a note explaining what specific sections needed practice, which ones don't need practice. Where do you think you'd have to break this, let's call it a solo, down, and what parts need the most practice? Deliberate practice. I'll assign the piece for you to complete in 10 weeks. So make sure that you pick a piece that you can complete in 10 weeks. All right, let me give you a quick look at this. This is the playlists here under, it's under my library. Playlists can be something like, here's 5 pieces that I've selected out of this method book for singing. I like these 5 pieces because they meet the needs that I have for my students. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this playlist with my students. So I've created a link, copy the link, paste it onto an email chain, or if I use a learning management system of some sort, share the link with the students. When they open the link, they are going to see those 5 pieces, and then they can listen to those 5 pieces, pick the piece, let you know which one they picked, and then you can assign that specific piece. All right. In order to make a playlist, it's the 3 dots after any piece on there. You just find the 3 dots to the right, and you can add to playlist. And here you can add it to any playlist you already have, or you can create a new playlist from scratch if you wish to do so. Another example of playlist would be something like hot cross buns. Here's 6 versions of hot cross buns in different method books. The student might find it easier to do it, or might be more enjoyable if he picks an accompaniment that they like, something that is more attractive to them. So they're going to practice it a little more if they make the choice. You can assign it after they pick. Same thing, just share the playlist with the kids, and then they'll get all of those. All right, let's go on to the assigner. I picked the piece out. Now I want to assign it. Here's where I'm going to put my instructions. I don't know if that'll work yet. In the comment section of your submission, grade the posture according to our rubric. All right, so now I've given a student, oh, he's looking for posture. So right note, wrong note doesn't matter anymore. I've got to look at my posture. Video options. But like I said, brand new, but it's just an on-off switch. It's really quite easy. Custom rubric, this is the old way of doing it, where you see all the rubrics. If you want to do an ungraded, you won't go through the rubric portion because it's not being graded. All right, for this one, just for now, we'll leave that checked. Metronome, do you want them to play it? Accompaniment, do you want them to have control over it? It says my part, they don't. If you wish them to have control on or off, you can choose that. And here's the tolerance from easy to strict. That's actually a goal that the student could set, is you've done it at easy and you got a 95 or above. Now I want you to work toward getting it at average, all right, in this amount of time. So there's a great goal for the kids if you want to write it up for them as an assignment, or just give them a, pick a piece and be able to get a 90 on easy and then get it to average or strict. Okay, so let's move on to the piece itself. Here's where the tempo comes in. This is the whole piece. The student says, I did really well, but from 29 to 39, I was having some trouble. This section right here. Well, that's because that's the hardest part. So let's just assign the hardest part and spend some time on that. More time spent on the hardest, less time spent on the easiest stuff. Deliberate practice, all right? The tempo. Do you want them to play it exactly at the speed? Well, no, they're learning it. I want to play them at half speed. All right, so now they have to play it exactly at 35. Here's where your options are open. You could leave that and every student has to play it at 35, or give them some choices. You have to play it at least at 35. I don't want you to go slower than that. But if you want to go faster, you go right ahead. The computer will let you go as fast as you want and you can submit it. Or another one, my personal favorite, any tempo. I want the right note. I don't care what speed you play it, because if you could play all the right notes in articulation, we can work on the tempo in a step-by-step by repeating it gently faster every time. So use that tempo to give kids choices for how they're going to play this and be successful. All right, here's the rubrics. These are all created by me. MakeMusic Cloud gives you the assessment grade only. That's the one where the computer tells you if it's green note, red note. That's important, but that's not the most important thing. Here's my articulation rubric. Edit it so you can see. Let's see. There's superior. I think I got them backwards. Excellent, and so forth. So now you can grade the student based on that, but the student can also grade themselves based on that rubric. This is simple information. Student makes between 2 and 5 articulation mistakes, but you can tell whether they're slurring or tonguing, right? Most kids can understand that and can grade themselves appropriately. The way to create a rubric up here is the plus sign. We want multiple rubrics, multiple level rubrics, because that way the student can pick a level, not just a articulation grade from 0 to 100. What do you think? I think I got a 78. It was almost a 79, but I'm pretty sure it was a 7. No, specific. Make multiple ones, and you just simply give it the level of title and the description here. Pretty easy to fill them out, and then you can assign them to the students. So that's rubrics. Let's go back. Another possibility, if you want to like narrow the criteria, they have digital material, so much material. But let's have, I want you to find a 6/8 or 9/8 piece, because we're going to work on triple meter. And I want you, it's got to be more than a minute long, and you can't play it now without practice, but you think you could do it within 4 weeks. Go. Find a piece. You've given the parameters. Your intention was the triple meter thing, by the way, but now the kids are picking what they want to do, so they're going to be more likely to put the practice time in to get it right. All right. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it back to Terry and let him wrap things up here.
Sounds good. So I guess some final thoughts we want to leave you with is, I think SMART goals are a pretty kind of good way to get both you and the students to focus on practice. Those, that acronym of SMART is hey, help me lose a lot of weight, and is really handy about just remembering how to practice. Setting the goal, though, is not enough. You as teachers need to guide students through use of deliberate practice to achieve these SMART goals. Remember, deliberate practice refers to that special type of practice that's purposeful and systematic. It's not just mindless repetition. It's requiring focused attention, and it has that specific goal of improving performance. You need to make sure that you have open dialogue throughout, so that you're talking with the students, and use checkpoints as they go along. We want them to have the feeling of tiny success as they're working towards that big goal. And the thing that we're leaving out is we are gathering a giant pile of data. We had so much data. It was one of those things that Kevin and I were able to use to really try to find where were the weaknesses in our overall curriculum. We've noticed that students' performance of triple meter was a really noticeable weakness in student performance. So it allowed us to reflect on that and try to offer more opportunities for our students to experience performing in a triple meter. It helped make our overall curriculum a better thing. I think that's kind of what we have here. Hopefully this spurred some ideas of ways that you can go, and after a lovely summer of refreshment, jump back in and have some ways to help our students work towards being better independent musicians.